Okay, hello, technical communications. Prof. Braden Evans coming at you with our presentation skills lecture for this week. Hopefully you'll find this useful and informative as you prepare for your own presentations at college and beyond, right? In your life beyond. So let's talk about this thing that makes some of us excited, makes all of us a little bit nervous, and is a critically important skill to develop over the course of our academic life and our career. Why is it important? Well, when you're in a workplace, people, employers, managers, they're looking for people with, the ability to research a topic, put it together, produce something visual, and communicate it, right? And so one presentation brings all of those skills into focus, right? It shows that you have the ability to do all of those things. So if you have the opportunity to give a presentation in the workplace, it's a golden opportunity to showcase your skills and abilities to people who might not see them, right? Who may not work with you day to day. They may not know you so well. You give a great presentation and suddenly you become, you put yourself on their radar. Okay. So it shows that you can handle challenging situations and take a bit of a risk and put yourself out there and stand on your 2 feet. So oral presentations are a lot like, a written document, right? There's different stages and you need to spend some time planning and writing, producing the thing, and then revising and completing it, right? So planning means understanding the situation, the topic, how you're going to give the presentation, getting organized for it. The writing part is to ensure that you're producing it in a language that your audience can understand, right? And then you're actually drafting your message. And then obviously, lots of practice, right? Overcoming anxiety, doing all those things to prepare yourself for the delivery of the presentation, okay? So when we're talking about analyzing, really important to define your purpose. Like, what is my goal here? Am I sharing information? Am I trying to sell some ideas to people? Am I trying to convince people of something, right? Make sure you're clear on what your objective is, right? What's your purpose? Then understand your audience, right? We talk about this almost every week. Who are these people? What do they know? What do they not know? And how do I present this thing to them so that they will understand it and appreciate it, right? What are the circumstances? Did this company, just have an outstanding year, or are they in financial trouble, right? You're going to adapt your tone of your presentation accordingly. Okay, so takes a little bit of work and research to understand sort of, what situation you're walking into. Okay, so then when you're organizing it, different ways of doing it. You can take a linear approach, right? Where, you kind of have the start to finish, it's what I do in our lectures, right? I have a kind of a story to tell from start to finish, right? And I follow that path. You can also have a non-linear approach. I know a lot of people who use Prezi and they can be a little more flexible that way. They bring information in, push it out, and bring it back in later on. It's less linear. And it depends on what you're talking about, right? But typically their standard approach that we take is more linear, all right? And what's critically important is that you boil your presentation down to a main idea, like some main takeaway that you want people to have that helps them understand, your objective, your mission, like putting it in their head that the purpose of your presentation is clear, okay? So defining your main idea, really critical. You want to bring it up many times and make sure you really sort of outline it to your audience, okay? Oh, it's important to limit the scope as well. So you would love to talk about everything, but you're going to be limited on time and resources and the way you can deliver the speech. So respect the time constraints, try to keep the audience engaged. And to do that, you can't talk about everything. You got to be really sort of focused and limit the scope of what you're going to talk about, okay? And that's how you can keep, the audience hooked, keep them engaged, right? Then just like a paper, you make a skeleton, an outline, right? Have your sort of main headings or subheadings, organize the flow, the logic, right? Organize the storytelling and really be clear about the main idea and then the major points that support your main idea throughout the presentation, right? Make sure you're citing things appropriately as well. And you have a compelling, interesting title that piques your audience's interest. Now, you adapt to this audience, right? I tell you guys this all the time. How do you do that? Well, consider what sort of venue, what sort of room, and what size of audience you'll be dealing with. If it's a small group like we have in our classrooms at Seneca, right? Usually I'm talking to 20 to 30 students, right? It's always more fun when we're sitting in a classroom hanging out together, but we do it virtually sometimes too, right? And I can sit on a desk, I can ask you guys questions, we can have this kind of interactive, casual approach, right? In a large auditorium like the one pictured here, you can't do that, right? The audience is too big. If I ask them, a question and I ask them all to, who's going to raise their hand, well, I'm going to get 100 hands in the air, right? So it can't work the same way. So in a larger room like this, in a big venue with a big audience, it needs to be more formal, right? I can't engage them in the same way that I would engage, a smaller group of people. So we consider the size, the venue, the topic, right? The time available, all of that to adapt to the audience that we're presenting to. Okay. All right. So yeah, be more formal with a large audience, be more casual with a smaller one. Generally, those are rules of thumb, right? Guidelines. Okay, so I talked about your main point, right? Your main idea. Make sure you drive that into their heads. And so I like to say, tell them in the introduction, you're going to tell them what you're about to tell them. Like you tell them what you're going to tell them. And in the body, the main parts of the presentation, you tell them. And in the close, the conclusion, you tell them what you told them. So tell them what you're going to tell them, and tell them what you told them, right? Being repetitive, even if it seems redundant, you really want them, you really want them to take away your main message. And remember that, audiences tend to recall the first things you say and the last things you say, but they get kind of lost in the middle. That's just human nature, So make sure you drive your points home early and often. Okay, so when you're introducing yourself, you got to get people's attention, right? So how can we do that? Well, you could ask a question. You could make a joke, but you got to be careful with humor, right? We got to make sure we're not offending people. So it has to be something that's tasteful and presented in a way that, you're not going to, make anyone in the audience feel bad, right? You could make a bold statement. Like, let's say there's a really unexpected statistic. Like, I don't know. Did you know that the average person walks 16,000 paces a day? I don't know. I'm just making that up. But something that maybe people don't expect to hear, right? That's a great opening line because you grab their attention, right? Another thing that's important is to establish your credibility. Like, let them know that the person they're hearing from, that they're dealing with, has credentials, is believable, right? So at the beginning of the semester, I always take a few minutes and introduce myself, and I make sure to tell my students, I'll say, look, like I've done a ton of school to do this, right? To have the privilege of being your prof. I did a bachelor's degree, I did a master's degree, I did a PhD, and I keep working on research and teaching in a bunch of different areas, right? So that when you're listening to me speak, you say, okay, well, this guy knows something about what he's talking about, right? He's not just some guy they found on the street, right? So that's important. Establish your credibility. You don't want to be boastful, but you want people to know, hey, like, I'm not just making these things up, right? And then preview your presentation, right? So try to give yourself like this oversight of the outline of it, right? And as you go through the introduction, you really want to give them like a reason to believe in you and to believe that they should listen to you, right? So different strategies and tactics to do it. You can unite people around a common goal. So one thing that's been common for all of us around the world these last couple of years is COVID, right? We can all relate. If I just need to say the word COVID, and I know that you and I, even if we lived in a different part of the world and we had different lives, we have a shared experience there, right? So it's a great way to bring people together, some kind of shared experience or common goal. Telling an interesting story, maybe having some example or something you can pass around and people can see, sort of holding their hands. asking people questions, right? So starting out your presentation saying, how many of you drove here today? And right away, people, start putting up their hands, right? Now they're curious, right? They're like, what is he gonna talk about? And maybe I'll be talking about fuel prices or climate change and carbon emissions. Who knows, right? But by asking the audience a question, you're engaging them, you're forcing them to get engaged, right? And then maybe some unexpected story, something like that. Okay. If you're going to make a joke, it's sometimes nice to make a joke about yourself because it's kind of disarming, right? And maybe people say, okay, this guy doesn't take himself too seriously, and you're not likely to offend too many people, which is an important consideration, right? Build your credibility, mention your accomplishments, let them know who they're talking to, then that it's a worthwhile person. Whoops. All right, now you go through the body of the presentation. You've hooked them, you've piqued their interest, right? Let's get to your main point. So I want to get to my main point early and often. So today, this presentation is going to focus on homework. I'm going to talk to you guys about homework, and then you start to break down the homework into different components, and you come back to homework. So present your main ideas, link them together in a logical sequence, in a flow that tells a story. And now you got to find ways to keep their attention, because you did a good job getting their attention in the introduction. Now you got to keep it, because this is the part of the presentation where they start to drift off, right? Start scrolling their phone or whatever, right? So how do we keep them hooked? How do we keep them focused? Well, you could relate your subject to the needs of the audience, right? So make sure they know that there's a reason they're here. There's a reason they're here listening to you today, because what you have to say is important for them, right? Try to anticipate what questions they might have and try to address them and answer them, like during your presentation. Use language that they understand, use variety in your tone of voice, right? Keep asking questions, keep them engaged that way. Bring up stuff that the audience would be familiar with, right? So if you're in the civil engineering program, maybe I should bring up civil engineering examples more so that I can keep you hooked, right? Asking for opinions, questions, comments, right? Use visuals. So this is the challenge of the body, is just keeping people engaged. Now you get to the close. Okay, how are we going to wrap this thing up? Make sure to restate your main point or your main points, right? Now's your chance to tell them what you told them, right? Give it a good, clear wrap up. So like something I tell students, like so often, students will be giving presentations in class and they'll just stop talking. And like, as though I'm supposed to know that that's the end, right? So if you gave a real clear close, if you said, okay, and so that's all I've got for you in my presentation today. Thank you very much for your time and attention. Then I know for sure you're done. So there's no awkward pause. We're going to start clapping and cheering you on and support you and be happy that you did what you did, right? But if you just stop talking, then how are we supposed to know? So give a clear wrap up and end on something strong and positive. So let's say your presentation's on climate change and you're talking about rising sea levels and things don't look so good in different parts of the world. Wrap up with something like, I have faith in humanity and I believe we're going to put the research effort in to solve this terrible problem, right? End with something strong, something that makes people leave your presentation kind of feeling good, right? Something that motivates them to maybe take some action or to talk to people, right? So like, you want to make sure that your listeners are leaving with your main points in their mind. You want them leaving in a good emotional state. If you're trying to convince them to do something, you want to try to make sure you drive that home, right? And yeah, motivate them to take some kind of action. Okay. Now, when it comes to the slides, a lot of times we really fall into traps where we put too much text in too small of a font on slides, and people stop paying attention to what we say. They're squinting at our slides trying to read what's on there. You should have minimal text on there, as little as you can get away with, and let them focus on you explaining the concepts, right? Maybe use some interesting visual graphics, right? That might be good, but putting too much text on a slide just takes away from, the audience's ability to focus on you, right? Same goes for charts and tables. You know, we talked about presenting data and how to do that well. Well, make sure they're simple enough, the ones that you use in your presentation. It can't be this super complex diagram or schematic, because again, it's like it's the equivalent of having too much text on your slides, right? You're gonna lose people in all of those details, right? Now, practicing. I don't know if you guys are like me, but it's helpful to stand in front of the mirror and give it a run through once or twice, you know? Can you present it and make yourself sound kind of natural? Can you do it without slides? It's also important, if you're giving a live presentation, go in the day before, try out the audiovisual equipment, right? Make sure everything's working, make sure your timing's on point. So practice really does make perfect in this. Make sure you can pronounce every word. So if you're talking about some new technical terms that you don't really have a lot of experience with, make sure you know how to pronounce them, right? Are you ready for some questions that people might have? So really putting some time into preparation makes the whole experience so much more enjoyable for you, right? Now you could choose to memorize a script. I think that's a tough choice, because if you blank, you kind of lose everything, right? You could read from some detailed notes. That's, like, again, not ideal, but I mean, you might not miss anything. Now, if you have a section that relates to like legal info or something like that, then you may need to read because you want it to be word for word perfect. But really, if you could just have a few key notes and that you're speaking referring to those, that's the best method. That's the ideal of what you want to do, right? Okay, so totally normal thing that we all experience is the anxiety associated with presentations. Some things to keep in mind. Practice a lot, it'll take the pressure off. Stop thinking you need to be perfect, because everybody misses something. You're usually the only one who knows about it. If you skip a part or whatever, it's just you that realizes that. Your audience doesn't know what you're about to say, right? But do get comfortable with your subject matter, right? Do the research, do the work to prepare it, and you'll feel so much more comfortable. Something athletes do: visualize your success. So the night before, you close your eyes, you're lying in bed. Imagine yourself giving a great talk and having people support you and cheer you on, right? Remember to breathe. Sometimes our chest gets tight, you know, we're kind of out of breath before. That's just our anxiety talking, right? Take a break and take a deep breath, right? Be ready with that first line you want to give them. Be comfortable physically. Wear, you want to look good, but wear something that you feel good in as well, right? It's going to be comfortable. And if you need it, take a 3-second break. How can you do that? There are a few different strategies. So one thing that I like to do, and many speakers do, you get a glass of water, right? So you have a bottle of water or a glass of water with you while you're giving your presentation. And if things just are going a little too fast, you need to kind of take a breather and slow down for a second. You casually reach over, you stop talking, casually reach over for your water, take a little sip, and put your glass down. That's 3-4 seconds that it just gives you this chance to catch my breath, you know? And then you can resume talking, all right? Focus on the audience members that are smiling at you. There's always some grump with their arms crossed at the back of the room. Don't look at them. Look at the ones up front that are giving you a smile and nodding their head. And no matter what happens, if you get stuck or you're tripping on your words or you forget where you were at, just keep going, right? There's nothing that can stop you from saying, okay, I'm not getting through this slide very smoothly. Let's just move to the next slide and let's carry on, you know? So all of those things can really help you sort of get better. So here's my anxiety chart that I like to carve up for students. This is how, you know, a lot of students kind of lead up to their presentation. So on our x-axis, we have time. On our y-axis, we have anxiety, right? And I tell you on day one of class, oh, on this day right here, you're going to have a presentation to deliver, okay? So this is the day, we'll call it P for presentation day, okay? And there we go. So presentation day. Okay, so here's what it is. So on day one of class, you know, there's a little anxiety because you're going, okay, we're going to have to give a presentation at some point this term. Okay, so there's some anxiety associated with that. You don't think about it too much till we start talking about it. And it's like, oh, okay, we got to work on this thing. You're working away. The presentation becomes a reality, right? And then it's like, oh, it's the night before. Your anxiety spikes the morning of class. you're losing your marbles, right? And then finally, you give your presentation and you finish and everybody claps and everybody's smiling, right? And at the end of it, oh no, I lost my chart. Here's what the graph looks like, okay? So we have our axes, we have our anxiety, right? It peaks and you give your presentation here and then this beautiful letdown, right? Where you just chill out, relax, you feel great about yourself because you actually pulled it off, you did it. And the nice thing is for the rest of the day, students feel great when they've given a good presentation. You feel good about yourself because you did it, right? So keep that in mind. Keep that little anxiety chart in mind to recognize that, when you start to feel these things, it's totally normal. And remember that at the end of this thing, you're going to feel good about doing it. So you just stay in the moment, just do it, and it'll be great once it's done. Okay, handling questions. There's no harm in saying, it's good to be prepared, but there's no harm in saying, I don't know, right? If someone asks you something that you really you're not sure about, don't skip it or ignore it. Just say, that's a great question. I didn't cover that when I was researching this topic. Let me follow up on it. I'll get your email address and I'll follow up with you and get you an answer. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Better that than to make something up and lie, right? All right. So, and just keep your cool, stay cool and calm and collected. All right. Make sure you're adhering to the guidelines for the presentation. Okay, one more thing. We're gonna have a small elevator pitch assignment, a 5% assignment coming up. So let's talk about that a little bit. Now, maybe many of you in the engineering programs have done an elevator pitch. I believe in interpersonal skills for engineers. You might have had this. I taught that course once, but that's okay. It's something you should be doing repeatedly, and you should keep working on it. Okay. So in case you don't know, it's like a 30-second sort of overview of yourself, like introducing yourself to someone in 30 seconds. Call it an elevator pitch because you can imagine riding an elevator with your favorite CEO, right? You have 30 seconds to tell them what you want to tell them, and that's it. So the thing about putting one of these together is, really making yourself stand out. What is unique about me? Everybody can say, oh, I work hard, I'm on time, I'm never late for work, and I do a good job. Yeah, okay, that tells me nothing about you, right? What are the things that make you unique, that make you stand out, right? Because you're going to be trying to get a job, trying to win over an investor, win over a client, find a partner in your business, right? So you got to kind of define your audience, understand what they're looking for, right? Have a great kind of opener, but make yourself unique. And part of that is getting specific. It's not saying I'm a civil engineer. It's saying I'm a civil engineer with a keen interest in da 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 da, like some specific area, right? Or lots of experience in this. Just keeping it broad and vague doesn't really give you anything, right? Make yourself sound interesting. Try to expect what questions they might have, or maybe you have a question for them. Do you think that my skills would be a good fit with your organization, right? So here are the things you want to include: who you are, what you do, what you love. I would say is a good one to put in there too. Like, what are you passionate about, right? And try to position it so that they can see that they would get something out of, interacting with you, right? Okay, and then as far as other tips go, I think, yeah, this is our last slide. So I'm gonna actually leave this to you guys. I'm gonna link the video on our course page. It's a short video where you have this recruiter talking about what makes a great elevator pitch. Okay, so this guy talks about being unique, being specific, making yourself sound different than everybody else, right? So I won't stream it live during this recorded lecture. I'll just share the link, and you guys can watch that on your own time. Okay, that's all I had for you guys this week. Thank you very much for your attention. Enjoy yourselves, work hard, have fun, and we'll catch you next week. Take care, everybody. Bye for now.